Hey guys, it's Mac again, and on today's episode of Glock Mods, we've got the OC Custom Triggers Enhanced Glock Trigger. Thanks for joining me today. This is Mac again, and today I just wanted to do a quick installation and a little bit of a review on absolutely one of my most favorite items that I've ever added to my competition Glock 34. If you've ever shot a Glock handgun before, you know that the standard factory trigger that comes in almost all Glock handguns is hit or miss. It's heavy, has a lot of creep, and it's a mixed bag. You never know what you're going to get. So working on the trigger is one of the very first things that many people do to their Glock handgun. I can tell you I spent countless hours and probably a good bit of change working on my trigger. And had I known at the time, the OC Custom Triggers Enhanced Glock Trigger would have been the absolute first thing that I did to my trigger. So let's briefly install this trigger. It's a lot easier than you think it is, and if you got maybe one or two simple tools, most importantly a Glock tool, you can do this in your garage or on your kitchen table like I did in less than 30 minutes. And at the end, I want to show you some footage of me shooting this trigger in competition because I absolutely love it. It has certainly enhanced my performance, and I just can't speak highly enough of it. The OC Custom Triggers Enhanced Glock Trigger is the best bang for your buck that you'll ever put in your Glock handgun.
The OC Custom Triggers Enhanced Glock Trigger is available for almost any model of Glock handgun. And when you take it out of the package, you're immediately struck with how high quality this piece is. The trigger bar is polished to almost immaculate finish. The trigger itself, with the trigger safety, feels incredibly comfortable in your hand. And they've also included the Wolfe Springs Reduced Power Performance Pack. This smooth face trigger with the red trigger safety is going to drop right in my competition Glock 34. Here's a little better close-up of this polished trigger bar. Now, if you've seen my previous video on the 25-cent polish job for Glock triggers, you can go through a lot of time and effort to do this. This trigger bar comes exactly like this from OC Custom Triggers, and there's not a rough edge or a burr anywhere on it. Here you can see the over travel adjustment screw. This, I believe, is the best feature of this trigger and really allows you to custom tune it to all your needs. To get started, first you need to make sure that your handgun is safe, verify that it's unloaded, and remove the slide from the frame. You do that by pulling it slightly to the rear and pulling down on the release lever. First, you'll need to remove the rear pin, which holds the trigger block into the frame, and then begin removing the front two pins from the locking block and the trigger. Remove the top one first from left to right, and then you can push out the bottom pin. Now you need to be careful as you do this, because once you do, you'll be able to take your slide release lever out from the frame as well. Now with these pins removed, you should be able to take the trigger, trigger bar, and trigger block from the frame very easily. To remove your factory trigger and trigger bar, you'll need to remove them from the trigger block. And this is accomplished by sliding the trigger bar off the trigger connector and then unhooking the trigger spring from the bar. The trigger spring hooks to the underside of the sear into a small hole, but pay attention to the orientation of the spring as you remove it. And now that our factory trigger is completely removed, we'll do a side-by-side comparison here of just the quality of the finish of the two trigger bars. Now granted, my factory trigger is a little dirty, but you can clearly see the difference in the polish and the quality of the metal. These are all factory Glock parts that are worked over and polished by OC Custom Triggers. Now, as I said, we're going to be replacing our trigger spring with the Wolfe extra power spring. Now we'll install our new Wolfe trigger spring, which is an extra power trigger spring, first to the trigger block and then to the underside of the sear. Again, remember the orientation of the spring because you want to install it in exactly the same way as the factory spring. Now once the spring is installed, then you'll just slide the new trigger bar right under your existing trigger connector. And this piece is completely installed, and now we just need to drop it back into the frame of the handgun. Now this can be a little tricky, and you may need to either slightly rock out or completely remove the locking block and able to get the trigger back down into the frame. So insert it with the trigger in the forward end of the frame first, and then you can snap the trigger block right down into the very back of the receiver. Check and make sure that everything is properly into the frame before starting to reinstall the push pins. Install the top locking block pin first, and then second reinstall the bottom trigger pin, being sure to reinstall your slide release lever as you do this. Then you can reinstall the third pin from the rear of the frame, which holds the trigger block in the frame. Next, we're going to replace the springs in our plunger and also our striker. So to do this, we'll take our slide and remove the rear end plate, being careful to not let the striker spring shoot out of the slide. It is under spring pressure, so keep your finger on the back of the slide as you remove the slide plate. Then you can remove the striker with its striker spring. Then we'll move forward and take the extractor out, which will allow us to take the plunger out. You can see in the plunger there's a very, very tiny plunger spring, and we're going to replace that with a reduced power plunger spring to make the trigger pull just a little bit lighter. This is a direct replacement, and the Wolfe spring is included in this kit. It's clearly labeled on the bag, so just install your new spring right into the bottom of the plunger and then replace the plunger into your slide. Now you'll have to install the plunger part of the way before you can reinstall your ejector. The ejector holds the plunger in place, so install both of these pieces at the same time. Now at this point, if you still had the factory Glock striker spring installed, you would want to replace it with either the 4, 4.5, or 5 pound reduced power striker springs in the Wolfe spring pack. Now since I've already replaced mine with a Wolfe spring, I'm going to skip this step. I don't think there's any need in replacing this spring at this time, as it continues to work very well for me. So I'll just reassemble my slide now. I'll reinsert the striker and striker spring, and after putting tension down onto the striker, I'll reinstall the end plate. Now after reinstalling my barrel into the slide, I'm going to put the gun back together, and we are completely finished installing this new trigger. And this is the good part. Now I actually get to see how it feels and adjust the pre-travel. Okay, this is 50 yards, okay, at a 10-inch gong with my OC custom trigger.
So once again, this is Mac. Thanks for joining me for this quick installation and review of the OC Custom Triggers Enhanced Glock Trigger. Now you can check these guys out at www.occustomtriggers.com, or you can find them like I did on Instagram. Check out their Instagram page and be sure to give them a follow, as well as mine. If you didn't know it already, check me out on Instagram as well. My username is BullittMcQueen 3-Gun. You'll always see interesting and cool pictures of my gear, as well as links and posts every time I post a YouTube video. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. You can do that by clicking on the video in the upper left. As a subscriber, you'll be immediately notified every time I upload a video on a weekly basis. And these videos include guns and gear reviews, as well as content that's always related to 3-Gun. And also, to watch more of my most popular videos, click on the video on the lower left. Once again, this is Mac. As always, be safe out there, and we'll see you next time.